Hey there, we're looking at Final Cut today. This is Design Lab, as the little thing says below me. I'm Adam, and this comic came out, I think, at the end of September 2024, so a little over a month ago, and I finally got a copy. Well, I found a copy. It's a pretty good sized graphic novel, about 200 pages, but I found it pretty easy to get through. And overall, the feeling, the tone of it was very much like in similar tone to his other books, Charles Burns. I think if you have to describe it, it's like strange. Like he's a fan of like the strange, and but it's also like different eras of strange. Like things like this creature that's like almost like this H.P. Lovecraft creature to kind of more like this David Lynchy modern strangeness to 1950s Twilight Zone and sci-fi horror movies, which get referenced a lot in the book. So yeah, that there's a feeling of strangeness throughout it. I think you've seen that in other Charles Burns books. I was thinking how he uses black and white images, but the book is mainly in color. And I think of all the artists working today, well, I don't know if all of them, but like he's one of the artists whose work, in some ways, I actually do almost prefer in black and white, or not maybe prefer, but I like to see it in black and white sometimes. So I like how he mixed it up and did a little of both in this. Some of these shots are totally black and white, which kind of harkens back to that sci-fi 50s sci-fi look of things. But then most of the book is in color, and his art, if you haven't seen it before, is very. It reminds me in some ways of one of my favorite artists, Ernie Bushmiller, who did the Nancy comic strip. And you might be like, how does this like Nancy? And it's not in the sense that the art doesn't look like it, but it is in the sense that Ernie Bushmiller's art was like something that you could almost. It felt almost like it was printed off of a factory, and in a sense, that's good. Like I liked how like his inking is so sharp, and like it does seem almost like it's not done by a human. And I don't mean that in like an AI sort of way. I mean it like it's like so perfect, perfectly like done, and it kind of the only other person I could think of at this level of like sharpness to their inking nowadays might be maybe Mike Allred, who is kind of more of the school of like the Jack Kirby school of art. This looks almost more like I said, Bushmiller or Basil Wolverton, a lot of other artists that I like. So yeah, this story is interesting. It's about like this group of young people. I don't know how old they are, maybe their 20s, and also unclear kind of what year it is. It's very, very ambiguous. Like it feels like it could be like nowadays maybe, but it could also be, 30, 40 years ago, and kind of unclear. But the characters, there's this kind of main character. They're making this movie, and they're just like it's just like a low budget home movie almost. And because you never see cell phones, I'm kind of inclined to think that it's like maybe in the past, not nowadays, like maybe the 1980s. And there's like all these films within the film and also dreams within the main character's narratives that kind of make you wonder what is actually happening and where are things actually taking place and existing. And it was interesting. I didn't like the main character at first. Like I feel like the first half of the book I wasn't really totally into it. Like I didn't care about this guy. He's kind of annoying in some ways, and uh, but I was surprised by the end that I liked it more than I thought I was going to like it. Like because the ending, without giving any spoilers away, is very both. It's like satisfying and unsatisfying at the same moment. But I found it interesting, which I think is in some ways more of an important question than if it is it like satisfying. Is it interesting? Does it make you think? And I think it did, and it made me think about it a lot. So looking at these other movies, which they are able to like kind of make fun of because they took place in the 1950s when special effects were not that good, and things like that. But there's also this kind of sense that implies that because you're able to look at it from the outside, that it is something that exists, that they live in a more real world where their depictions of art and stuff. It's kind of interesting too because the character, I don't know how autobiographical this character is because he's an artist too. And I love all these moments though when we get to see inside his sketchbook because it's very different from the usual style of inking, of inked art, ink comic style that we get in a lot of Charles Burns comics. This is more like, pencils and just like a more of a different style. But I liked it. And I think this is like, I assume this is Charles Burns art. I mean, it could be somebody else's art, but I'm pretty sure it's Charles Burns art. It's just, it looks more realistic than his art, which he's kind of settled into more of a cartoony style. So it kind of having these two paralleled is interesting. It kind of, I know saying something interesting is interesting doesn't really add much to the conversation, but it just kind of creates this contrast between what is real and what is not. Yeah, so this is kind of like Lovecraft, and I think I talked about that, but uh, every element of what is kind of strange, like I talked about, is incorporated into this, and there's always this sense in Charles Burns books of like I feel like it's like when he was this age, the feeling of like getting high around others and hanging out with them and just absorbing culture. It shows up in a lot of his books, and yeah, I think this is one of this art here looks almost like Dan Clowes, this style of character. There's some interesting characters in this, though. I think the characters were well done, and I didn't initially, like I said, like them a lot all at first, and some of them weren't that well fleshed out. I think, but some of them, as it went on, I think it was improved. Uh, yeah, so they're making this movie, and it's like, is it going to be a good movie or not? Is this garbage? But somehow it like becomes apparent that this story is the movie itself, even though, and it like it exists in this character's head, but the character is having mental issues, perhaps we don't know, but there's referred to as him being on pills, and it's like, so we get this really wavy sense of like what is actually happening and where is this happening and what actually did occur, which I liked, and yeah, so like I said, I'm gonna avoid the spoilers to how this thing ends. So I'm just kind of gonna blaze towards the end. But yeah, some wonderful art. He's been sorry, uh, sorry the dog. He's been. I haven't looked at all his books, and this makes me want to check out some more of them. I think I've read Black Hole and The Hive, maybe another one or two, but I haven't. There's ones I haven't gotten to, and I would like to. These pages are interesting because this is, these are real movies. This is that movie, The Last Picture Show, with I forget her name, Candace. I'm blanking, but I have seen this movie a long time ago. He definitely has a love of pop culture, and like then I used to always feel like his books take place around the 70s or 80s, and it's like locked in history at that point. So yeah, see if there's anything else I wanted to add. There was one page in here, or two pages in here that I really liked. Uh, yeah, there is some full body nudity. So I mean, I don't know if that's a surprise. This is a Fantagraphics book, or no, actually no, this is not Fantagraphics. I think he's had a lot of books published by Fantagraphics, but I don't think this one is. And but where was that page? There was like this two-page sequence that I really liked, even though nothing really happened. Uh, yeah, some really trippy moments, and it's kind of I think the tone of his stories, because they're always usually in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, and I lived up that way for a while, and I like some of the neighborhoods even in one of his book I remember. So like I don't know, like it's not a neighborhood a place I want to visit really, but it's like I kind of understand the tone of how the culture feels in that place, and he captures it well, whether you like the Pacific Northwest or not. I don't know where he lives. Maybe Seattle area. Okay, so yeah, beautiful art. His sense of the way that he draws like some nature stuff is really what is really amazing. Yeah, I think the final sequence though, where they're watching the movie, and but it's also talking about how he wishes the movie would be made. The sense of ambiguity about what actually happened is wonderful. I think that is like that was the moment when I'm like, okay, this is really masterful. This is well done, and the absolute ambiguity of it all. So, and there's things that happened that obviously didn't happen, I think, but it's like so unclear and vague, and I loved it. So, if you don't like ambiguity and things like that, then this may not be your book. But I thought it was very well done and one of his best that I've read by him. So check it out. Final Cut, available now in comic stores and online and so on, by Charles Burns. And I think he had another book out this year called Comics, but I don't think that's necessarily a story. I think it's like like comic covers, fake comic covers from I don't really know from the 50s or something. But if I could find a copy of that, I'll take a look at that too because I'm pretty sure we'll look at more books by him in the future. But if you haven't seen Charles Burns, this is probably a pretty good place to start. If any of those things I mentioned, like Lovecraft, Twilight Zone, David Lynch, appeal to you, then this may be a book you enjoy. So, Final Cut by Charles Burns.